The train erupts into a frenzy. People are screaming, barreling down the carriage to try and get away from the host. Barely anyone paid her any attention a few seconds ago, but the second she exploded, everyone noticed. The passenger gets barged out of the way by a stampeding commuter. Another person shoves past and they fall, buried under the trampling feet. Looking toward the spot where the host had been standing, the passenger expects to see a bloody mess scattered across the carriage. Instead, between the kicking, stomping legs, they notice a blanket of thin, white wisps, covering the train floor and the doorway next to where the woman had been just seconds ago. They're strange, almost like millions of tiny little hairs, and they're spreading. The people closest to the wisps are quickly being covered, the tiny white things covering them, clinging to their clothes, climbing up their legs. Despite their frantic efforts to wipe them away, the passenger watches in horror as more and more of the people on the train are smothered by them, and the wisps keep crawling along, getting closer to where they're trapped. The investigator leads their team of small-town sheriffs and deputies heading into the dank, dark cave. Behind them, a trail of discarded shoes, clothes, and dropped personal effects, all hints that all the slew of disappearances leads to this spot, a cave in the woods, miles outside of town. As they move through the darkness, the investigator's flashlight glances off stony walls until the sound of something shifting comes somewhere deeper in the cave. Everyone freezes, waiting to hear it again. The cold air in the cave goes still. Then something stirs again. Heading down the rocky passageway, the investigator is the first to step out into the main chamber of the cave. To their surprise, there's nobody here. 3 structures of what appear to be plants form pillars throughout the room. Out of the corner of their eye, the investigator is sure they see one of them shift. A trick of the light, it has to be. So they take a closer look. It's not just plants. There's more. It almost looks like flesh. Then the investigator sees something that makes their blood run cold. They shine the beam over the grotesque mass, and an eye contracts, staring back. They've found the missing people, and somehow, they're still alive. Among the alarming anomalous discoveries made by the SCP Foundation, few have the same far-reaching and potentially deadly consequences as SCP-129. Ever since the discovery of the organisms, researchers and experts in the fields of anomalous microbiology and pathology have determined that SCP-129 may be the single most dangerous infection on the planet. Following a series of incidents involving a commuter train in Redacted and a spate of disappearances in Redacted, the SCP Foundation became aware of a particular strain of different fungal species. The exact number of variations and species affected by this phenomenon remains undisclosed, even amongst Foundation researchers. There are an estimated 2 to 3 million species of fungus on Earth, though only 155,000 with any formal designation. There is no confirmation or indication of exactly how many of these fungi are instances of SCP-129. The only known commonality between the affected species is that they are all types of fungus that can infect any animal with mucosal membranes. Due to a combination of historical factors, a vast percentage of the human population, as well as most animals, are naturally immune to SCP-129, or at least can resist the symptoms of a later stage infection. The condition, known as progressive fungal infection, advances through 5 stages of SCP-129, with symptoms worsening from stage 1 to stage 5. Each stage of infection increases the likelihood of progression to the next, influenced by both ongoing exposure to SCP-129 carriers and the subject's natural resistance. However, resistance diminishes with every stage, making advancement, stage 3 to stage 4 and so on, more likely. Though most of the world is considered to be naturally immune to SCP-129 infections higher than stage 2, this is not true of all organisms on Earth. However, given the subtlety of the earlier stages symptoms, detecting and diagnosing a confirmed instance of SCP-129 is highly difficult. It is considered by Foundation researchers to be far outside the treatment capabilities of most civilian medicine. While early detection may prevent progression to stage 3, no efforts are currently underway to improve diagnostic methods for infections below that threshold. Despite this, The symptoms of the first two stages have been observed in controlled environments and recorded within the SCP Foundation database entry for SCP-129. During a Stage 1 infection, the first organism, referred to as an instance of SCP-129-01, is introduced to its potential host and immediately begins to attack their mucosal membranes. The anomalous fungal organism will then begin to multiply rapidly. However, it does so in a way that is considered to be unobtrusive. Symptoms of a Stage 1 SCP-129 infection are incredibly hard to detect, if they're even present at all. While normally asymptomatic, some infectees may start to experience a faint but persistent smell. Test subjects exposed to known species of SCP-129 have described the smell as being vaguely yeast-like. This can lead to Stage 1 outbreaks among civilians to be misdiagnosed in persons of any gender as Candida infections. This fungal condition is known to produce a similar odor in some cases, caused by the production of ethanol and acetaldehyde that ferment sugars within the body. However, overgrowths of the Candida fungus can also commonly be odorless. It is also known that certain medications, especially antibiotics with any mold content, can produce a similar smell. The key difference between progressive fungal infections and other non-anomalous diseases is how it prepares the body for the subsequent stages of infection. The multiplication of SCP-129-01 weakens the host's body and immune system, allowing for a second fungal organism, referred to as SCP-129-02, to enter the mix. Once the host has been infected with two species of anomalously affected fungus, symptoms become marginally more noticeable, but no less easy to misdiagnose. A victim carrying both an instance of SCP-129-01 and SCP-129-02 will begin to experience symptoms identical to acute viral nasopharyngitis, otherwise referred to as the common cold. Among infected humans, this commonly leads to assumptions that they are simply battling a regular, non-anomalous illness. Most civilians affected by SCP-129 will attempt to treat their condition with home remedies, over-the-counter cold and flu treatments, or possibly even prescribed medication. However, while trying to treat these cold-like symptoms, the presence of SCP-129-02 will lower the efficiency of the victim's immune system, which allows the first organism, SCP-129-01, to become further entrenched within their body. During Stage 1, the risks of a severe progression, while never zero, remains low. In a vast majority of cases, both SCP-129-01 and SCP-129-02 will leave their host within 4 to 6 days. While these species are fairly widespread, by themselves they pose little danger. Most of the global human and animal population lack protection against exposure to these fungal organisms. However, healthy immune systems typically repel the species with relative ease. The real threat posed by SCP-129-01 and SCP-129-02 is their potential to facilitate an infection of another organism, SCP-129-03. Exposure to this is what denotes a Stage 2 case of progressive fungal infection. Stage 2 sees the introduction of SCP-129-03 to an organism's immune system. Under normal circumstances, the presence of this type of anomalous fungus can be stopped by the infectee's natural mucus. However, this only occurs when encountering SCP-129-03 in isolation from other strains of SCP-129 fungi. In cases of progressive fungal infection, exposure to SCP-129-01 during Stage 1 predisposes the subject to secondary infection by SCP-129-03 in Stage 2. This is because of the way that SCP-129-01 typically behaves within the mammalian body, causing the composition of naturally produced mucus to be altered. This means they are less resistant to SCP-129-03 exposure. Once this type of anomalous fungus establishes a presence in the host's body, it causes further internal bodily alterations. SCP-129-03 targets an infected person or animal's mucus, lymph, and blood. Just as SCP-129-01 facilitates colonization by SCP-129-03, these alterations create conditions that enable additional SCP-129 fungal species to establish within the host. Owing to these anomalous alterations, Stage 2 infections are often denoted by more noticeable symptoms, such as greatly increased mucus production within the body. Subjects can also develop a nagging cough caused by excess amounts of phlegm, as well as lingering low-grade fevers and increased levels of sweating and salivating. All of these symptoms can, when reported to a civilian general practitioner, be misdiagnosed as sinusitis or respiratory infections or the flu. Foundation anomalous disease specialists have identified several symptoms unique to Stage 2 SCP-129 infection. The first is an infected person reporting specific changes to their diet, in particular, a sudden preference to consume vegetables over other food groups. The second is the complaint that the subject finds fruit juices to suddenly start tasting odd. This is often noticed in those attempting to naturally boost their vitamin C levels to help fight what they likely assume to be a case of the flu. The Foundation is awaiting Ethics Committee approval to monitor patient records and physician notes in major hospitals for indicators of Stage 2 progressive fungal infection. In most cases, this stage and the presence of SCP-129-03 usually lasts around 2 weeks, though can persist as long as 4 months in some cases. Generally, the immune systems of most humans, among those who are of average health, are able to expel instances of SCP-129 fungal species and allow for a full recovery. A considerable percentage of the human population has already experienced a Stage 2 SCP-129 infection at some point in their life, leading to a natural immunity that allows most people to survive this stage. Although few cases advance this far, subjects with earlier stages of progressive fungal infection remain at risk of progressing to Stage 3. There are 3 anomalous species known to cause a Stage 3 infection, each with their own symptoms associated with exposure. While nearly all animals, humans included, are immune to these, the effects of Stage 1 and Stage 2 of SCP-129 mean that victims can become infected with one or more of the following: SCP-129-04, which causes increased lacrimation, the production of tears, as well as a slight yellowing of the eyes, and redacted. SCP-129-05 exposure is often denoted by redacted, as well as a gradual thickening of the host's nails and a significant increase in the production of earwax. Then, SCP-129-06 can cause the infected subject's waste material to become an unnaturally bright yellow and the appearance of small pellets. As with exposure to SCP-129-01, there is once again a distinct yeast smell. However, it is notably stronger when a victim is infected with SCP-129-06. The presence of any one of these species is considered a Stage 3 case of progressive fungal infection. In these cases, the fungi are so entrenched within the host's body that they cannot be treated with conventional medicine, and removal is only possible through extraordinary and highly risky measures. Should a host become affected by all 3 of these types of anomalous fungi, then within hours of exposure, they will develop even more severe symptoms. These have been likened to flu symptoms in some cases, but are notably worse in others, causing infected hosts to be bedridden for 3 to 5 weeks. After this time has elapsed, a victim will appear to have made a full recovery, not knowing things are only about to get worse. By this point, a Stage 3 survivor will have species of SCP-129 present throughout their body, affecting all major functions. This marks the passage into Stage 4 of progressive fungal infection. From the outset, these subjects might appear healthier than those experiencing Stage 3. They will report generally feeling healthy and may even appear more lively and energetic than they were even before contracting SCP-129. Internally, though, fungal species SCP-129-01 through to SCP-129-06 will have completely infiltrated their immune, respiratory, circulatory, reproductive, and central nervous systems, along with their redacted. Mycelium is the structure of a fungus that functions as its roots, consisting of a mass of branching hyphae that resemble threads. During Stage 4, the mycelia of SCP-129 species will start to permeate through the skin of infectees, replacing a significant percentage of the host's hair. The hyphae are almost identical to human or animal hair, even being shed in the same manner. This makes it impossible to distinguish what might be ordinary hair from the roots of anomalous fungi without closer analysis. These hyphae allow the various SCP-129 species to propagate between their current host and potential new ones. Anyone that comes into contact with these hyphae has a higher than 90% chance of becoming infected with progressive fungal infection. Despite heightened susceptibility to SCP-129 fungi, Stage 4 subjects also exhibit severely diminished resistance to common viral and bacterial pathogens. Non-infected creatures possess a substantially greater chance of surviving disease than those afflicted with Stage 4 infection. It is because of this that other secondary or tertiary infections are also contracted by these hosts, and with their immune systems and other functions compromised by SCP-129, their survival is significantly impacted. All known Stage 4 victims have died within a few weeks. The very few that survive progress to the 5th stage of SCP-129. Stage 5 is particularly unique, even among the preceding stages of progressive fungal infection. This is largely because it isn't characterized by consistent symptoms that present across all cases that reach this level of severity. The symptoms of Stage 5 tend to vary depending on a variety of factors. Potentially even any number of unknown variables can impact the way that this stage manifests in hosts. It's been assumed by Foundation researchers that Stage 5 of SCP-129 is primarily impacted by the infected host's genetics, as well as their physiological state and their external environment. The only commonality with any of the prior stages is between Stage 5 and 4. Both render the victim's illness as highly contagious, even able to infect new hosts that had previously shown signs of total natural immunity. Much of the SCP Foundation's data on known manifestations of Stage 5 has been expunged from official records. Given how widespread the various species of SCP-129 fungus are, this has been deemed a necessary redaction to avoid sowing undue panic among research personnel. There are, however, at least 3 confirmed instances wherein a human host experiencing a Stage 5 case of progressive fungal infection displayed significant anomalous symptoms. The first recorded incident occurred in February of Redacted. The exact location has been expunged. Eyewitness reports from a commuter train describe a female passenger boarding without any visible symptoms of infection. This woman is believed to have contracted SCP-129, with her condition progressing to Stage 5. At some point during the train's journey between stops, commuters witnessed the woman suddenly and instantaneously expanding. One testimony describes her as briefly resembling a balloon being inflated before exploding. Instead of showering the interior of the train and her fellow passengers with blood and viscera, however, the woman's unexpected bursting released millions of fungal spores and filaments throughout the carriage. The SCP Foundation was able to intercept the commuter train, halting it between stations and ensuring that all exits off the vehicle remained sealed. When an appointed hazmat team arrived to sterilize the train, the interior surfaces were covered in enough spores to resemble a thick coating of dust, clinging to seats, doorways, handrails, the train floor, and the bodies of deceased passengers. Any surviving subjects that had been exposed to the hazardous anomalous fungal material were detained and placed under a mandatory quarantine by Foundation agents. Close analysis showed that the victim, based on what little remained of her body, had been infected with various species of anomalous fungi, including SCP-129-09, SCP-129-14, and Redacted. Anyone else found during the quarantine procedure to have been similarly affected to SCP-129 exposure was then euthanized. Their remains, along with any objects that had been carrying spores, were incinerated as per the Foundation's protocols for curbing anomalous outbreaks. Among the casualties were a number of personnel accidentally exposed to the spores during attempts to decontaminate the scene. The second known incident of SCP-129 Stage 5 took place in Redacted, a small town surrounded by large forested areas, which are known to also be home to several large, uncharted cave systems. The Foundation became aware of a number of disappearances that took place in the area, thanks to agents embedded within local police departments who observed an uptick in missing persons reports. There was nothing to suggest that these were anything more than the result of non-anomalous crime until investigators located a cave several miles outside of town. Foundation agents were dispatched to prevent information pertaining to what the investigators had found from reaching the public. Capturing and detaining the police assigned to look into the disappearances, agents were directed towards the cave and moved in to investigate themselves. Inside, Foundation personnel discovered what appeared to be several large mounds of pulsating flesh mixed with vegetative material. While most of the viscera was unrecognizable, the local police investigators were able to point out that there were some distinctively human characteristics to the mounds. Some of these features allowed investigators to identify that parts of the mass were the missing people they'd been looking for. This case in particular has baffled SCP Foundation researchers since its discovery. Many personnel assigned to develop an understanding of how this anomalous fungus works have tried to theorize exactly what the purpose of these 3 pillar-like masses of flesh were. The leading school of thought is that this specific combination of SCP-129 fungi was able to interact normally with the local populace, attempting to infect others. It's thought that after a period of time, the infected citizens would then feel compelled to travel to the cave, though for what exact reason or how they ended up there remains unknown. Upon arriving, the infected victims would then undergo an anomalous physiological change, becoming the pulsating vegetative flesh mounds that local investigators and Foundation agents discovered. These appear to be living organisms that were anomalously modified to provide species of SCP-129 fungus with a long-term source of sustenance. Further analysis of the recovered flesh and vegetative matter led Foundation researchers to the conclusion that these mounds could live for potentially over 100 to several hundred years. This would allow the various species that cause SCP-129 to survive and thrive for an extended period of time. It is unknown how the human hosts of the fungus would experience this, whether or not they retained their sentience after becoming assimilated into the food mounds. An autopsy revealed the presence of SCP-129-10, SCP-129-11, SCP-129-14, and one additional, albeit redacted, species of SCP-129. After discovery, the cave site where the food mounds were discovered was subsequently quarantined, sanitized, and then later sealed by the Foundation. Data surrounding the third confirmed instance of Stage 5 manifestation has been expunged. SCP-129 is still considered to be an at-large anomaly and infects a substantial number of both human beings and animals on a daily basis. There is no known cure, other than the natural immunity much of the population has to protect them against the early stages of infection. Since simultaneously containing all species known to cause the anomalous disease would dramatically disrupt the global ecosystem, the Foundation's efforts for cases of progressive fungal infection are instead focused on treating infectees. The intention is also to gradually reduce the population of known SCP-129 member species, eradicating them over time to lessen the impact on the ecosystem. Any outbreaks of Stage 3 or higher are to be contained as quickly as possible. Infected individuals are subject to the Foundation's highest risk contagion protocols. Under no circumstances can cases be allowed to progress to Stage 5. Check out the DrBob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of DrBob, like telepathy virus makes you hear everyone's thoughts and drives you insane. SCP-405.